He saved a woman's life on a mountain trail, then lost his job, his peace, and nearly his reputation, until 10 luxury cars showed up at his doorstep. It started with gravel, loose, sharp, sliding under his boots just enough to force him into a squat. Kevron Daly had hiked this part of Beartooth Pass more times than he could count. He liked the quiet, the height, the cold. It was one of the few places where he didn't feel like a nurse, a black man, or a number on someone's HR schedule. Just Kevron, breathing clean air, letting the world sort itself out below him. But that Sunday? Something was off. A faint groan. That's what made him stop. Not an animal. Too human. It came from off the main trail, about 30 feet into some dense brush. He hesitated for maybe 2 seconds. Then he dropped his pack and pushed through the branches. "Hey, can you hear me?" he called out. The response was shaky, weak. "Here, please." That's when he saw her. Face smeared with blood and dirt, hair clumped against her forehead, and her right leg twisted in a way that made his stomach knot. Her hiking pants were torn at the thigh, blood already drying at the seams. "I got you," Kevron said, instinct kicking in as he crouched beside her. She flinched. "Don't touch me. Wait. Who are you?" He held up both hands, palms out. "Kevron, I'm a nurse. You're hurt bad, but I can help you." She blinked, dazed. "I felt... my phone's dead." He gave a single nod. "Let me take a look at your leg, all right?" She didn't respond, but she didn't stop him either. Kevron worked fast. He gently touched the swelling, saw the angle of the break, and knew it needed to be stabilized. He reached into his pack and pulled out 2 aluminum tent poles and a roll of gauze. She watched him, breathing fast, pain in her eyes, but silent. "This is gonna hurt, but it'll help more than it'll hurt," he said. She grit her teeth. "Just do it." Kevron wrapped her leg with practiced care, using the poles as a makeshift splint. He tore the sleeves off his undershirt to add extra padding. He hadn't had to field dress a limb since nursing school. It came back to him like muscle memory. "You alone?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. She nodded slowly. "I needed space. Just a weekend to breathe." "Bad weekend for it," he muttered, adjusting the final wrap. When he tried to lift her, she yelped in pain. She was light, but unconscious weight was always heavier. He took a breath, braced his back, and hoisted her into a carry position, her arms around his neck, legs resting across his arms. They were at least 3 miles from the ranger station. "I'll stop when you need a break," she whispered through clenched teeth. Kevron looked at her and said, "Nah, I'll stop when you need a break. You've already done your part." She actually laughed at that. It was a strange, short sound, almost bitter. "You always hike around saving strangers?" Kevron smiled, despite the burn already building in his arms. "Only the rich ones with blood on their faces." She squinted at him. "You don't know who I am, do you?" "Nope. Should I?" Her silence was answer enough. The walk down was brutal. Every step shifted her weight. Twice he nearly lost balance. Once he slipped and landed hard on one knee, jarring them both. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. She was half-conscious by the time they reached the station, skin pale, lips dry, body trembling. The ranger, a lanky guy named Wyatt, opened the door and froze. Kevron didn't waste a second. "She's got a lower tib-fib fracture, mild head trauma. I stabilized it, but she needs evac ASAP." Wyatt moved fast after that, radioed for help, took her name down. Kevron barely heard what she said until Wyatt's voice cracked. "Wait. You're Blythe Kessner." Kevron blinked. He looked down at her, but she didn't look back. Her eyes were shut, head tilted against his chest. He didn't say anything else. But the name stuck in his mind, heavy as the weight he'd just carried down the mountain. Kevron didn't drive straight home. He sat in his truck for a while, parked near the ranger station, elbows resting on the steering wheel, staring out at nothing. The weight of the last few hours hadn't caught up to him until now. His arms ached. His shirt was stiff with sweat and dirt. His knee throbbed from that fall. But all he could think about was that name, Blythe Kessner. It meant nothing to him in the moment. But the look on the ranger's face? Like he'd just watched someone pull off a mask and reveal royalty. That stuck. He pulled out his phone and searched the name. Tech magnate. Billionaire. CEO of Terra Helix, the clean energy company that had disrupted the oil sector. Rare public appearances, low media profile, net worth, somewhere in the ballpark of $6 billion. Kevron let out a low breath and leaned back in his seat. He hadn't recognized her, just another person in pain, and that's exactly how he'd treated her. Part of him wondered if that's why she didn't say anything right away. Maybe it felt good, for once, to not be treated like a headline. By the time he got home that night, his phone had already started blowing up. Wyatt must have talked. Or maybe someone from the helicopter crew that evacuated her did. Local news was picking up the story, calling him Montana's quiet hero. Someone had snapped a blurry photo of him carrying her down the trail, muscles straining, face locked in focus. His neighbors in the apartment complex left a handwritten note on his door. "You're the talk of the building, man. That was some hero stuff." Signed, Tammy in 2B and her teenage son, Rowan. He smiled, stuck the note on his fridge, and collapsed on his couch. That night, he slept hard. But when he woke up, things had shifted. There were camera crews parked outside his building. A news van with the side door open. A reporter holding a mic was chatting with someone near the curb. Kevron peeked through his blinds and groaned. He wasn't built for this kind of attention. Give him a packed ER, a screaming toddler, or a motorcycle crash victim. Fine. But people wanting sound bites? Spotlights? That wasn't him. His phone buzzed again. A message from his supervisor, Lorna Pascoe, short and sharp. "We need to talk. Come in today. 11. Kevron stared at the screen for a few seconds, then typed, "Is this about the patient I helped?" No answer. He showered, dressed in scrubs, and left the building through the back staircase. Avoided the cameras. Took the long way around to get to Westbrook Medical. Walked in like it was any other day. But it wasn't. People didn't look at him the same. A few gave half smiles. Others glanced away like they'd been caught watching something private. It felt off, like admiration and judgment were fighting for space in the same room. He knocked on Lorna's office door. She waved him in without looking up from her laptop. "Sit," she said. He did. She didn't waste time. "You left your shift without notice." "It was my day off," she raised an eyebrow. "Technically, yes, but you were still under emergency call status. If we'd needed you, you wouldn't have been reachable." Kevron blinked. "I saved someone's life." "You broke protocol," she said flatly. There was a long silence. Then she folded her hands. "Look, Kevron, the board isn't happy. One of them has personal dealings with Terra Helix. This kind of media attention? It's complicated." "You're serious?" he said, stunned. "I'm not saying it's fair, but decisions are being made that I can't control." He stared at her, feeling heat rise in his chest. "So what? I'm suspended?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're being let go. Effective immediately." Kevron stood up slowly. "You're firing me because I helped someone." "Because of how it was perceived," she corrected. He left the office without a word. Back in the hallway, he passed a nurse he'd trained 2 years ago. She tried to meet his eyes. He didn't let her. But as he stepped out of the hospital for the last time, something in his gut told him this wasn't the end of it. Not by a long shot. Kevron didn't go home right away. He drove without direction, knuckles tight around the wheel, heart pounding with the kind of rage that had nowhere to land. He wasn't surprised. Not really. But that didn't make it hurt any less. Being fired was one thing, but being discarded like trash for doing the right thing? That sat deep. He pulled into the parking lot of a diner off Interstate 90, somewhere between Billings and Laurel. The kind of place with peeling signs and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. He'd eaten there a dozen times during long shifts. The waitress, Bia, was behind the counter like always, cracking eggs with one hand and cussing at the radio. Kevron slid into a booth by the window. She noticed him after a moment. "Hey, Kev, you look like hell. You want coffee or a shot of something stronger?" He let out a dry laugh. "Both, in that order." She brought the cup without a word. After a while, she leaned on the counter and looked at him. "I saw you on the news." That was you, huh? The hiker nurse? He shrugged. Guess so. What they didn't say is how that billionaire got out there without anyone knowing. Whole towns talking. Kevron sipped the coffee, then said quietly, she didn't want attention. Neither did I. B nodded slowly. Some folks do good and stay quiet. Some folks take pictures and pat themselves on the back. Apparently doing the right thing just got me fired. He added. She didn't blink. Let me guess. Something about rules, timing, liability? Kevron smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. They said it was because I was on emergency call status, but I know it's more than that. Someone on the board didn't like me making headlines with her. B snorted. That's about the weakest excuse I've heard in a while. He looked out the window. A storm was rolling in from the west, grey clouds stacking like bricks. You know what the kicker is? He asked. She hasn't even reached out, not a text, not a call. I'm not mad at her. I just thought maybe she'd check in. B refilled his cup and said, maybe she will. Or maybe she thinks you don't need thanks. But Kevron wasn't sure anymore. That night he got back home late. No cameras, no reporters, just silence. The attention had fizzled faster than it came. Maybe it had all blown over. Maybe it was for the best. He sat on his couch, scrolling through job boards on his phone. ERs in Missoula. Urgent care clinics in Bozeman. Nothing nearby. Nothing stable. Nothing that paid enough. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. He answered. Hello. A pause. Then a voice. Soft, steady, familiar. Kevron. It's Blythe. His mouth went dry. Wow. Didn't think I'd hear from you. I wasn't sure if I should call, she said. But I found out what happened at the hospital. I'm sorry. That wasn't supposed to happen. He let the silence stretch for a second. You didn't owe me anything. I did what anyone would have done. No, she replied firmly. You didn't. You carried a complete stranger down a mountain with a broken leg. You never once asked who I was. You treated me like a person, not a prize. Kevron shifted in his seat. So why call now? Because I've been thinking about people like you, she said. People who get punished for doing the right thing. I want to talk to you. Face to face. He narrowed his eyes. You're still in Montana? No, but I'll be back in the morning. Why? There was a pause. Because this isn't finished. I have something I want to give you. It's not charity. It's a door. He didn't know what that meant. Before he could respond, she added, You'll know it when you see it. Then she hung up. Kevron stared at the screen, the call log now showing a blank number and a timestamp. The wind outside rattled the window pane, but something about her voice stuck with him, like she already knew the next chapter of his life was about to show up on his doorstep.
Kevron woke up the next morning to the sound of an engine. Deep, low, smooth. Not the usual sputtering trucks or the occasional neighbor starting their SUV. This sound was different. It wasn't just one car either. It was multiple. Tires crunching slowly against the pavement. He rubbed his eyes, shuffled over to the window, and pulled the curtain back. At least 10 vehicles were pulling into his street. Black, silver, deep blue. All of them polished to a mirror shine, not a speck of dirt on any of them. Mercedes, Bentleys, a white Rolls-Royce near the front. They weren't just parking. They were lining up right outside his building. Kevron stepped back from the window, his heart suddenly kicking hard. He opened his front door just in time to see Mrs. Holland from next door, clutching her little dog with one hand and shielding her eyes from the morning glare with the other. You know those people? She asked, eyes wide. Kevron just stared. I think... maybe. The passenger door of the Rolls-Royce opened slowly. A man in a dark suit stepped out first. Then came a woman. Tall, composed, using a slim cane for support. Dark sunglasses, hair pulled back. But the moment she lowered the glasses, Kevron recognized her. Blythe Kessner. She wasn't surrounded by press or cameras, just a quiet team that looked like they belonged to some diplomatic mission. Two of them carried sleek briefcases. One scanned the street like he was casing it for threats. Blythe walked toward him slowly, eyes fixed on his. I didn't mean to make a scene, she said once she was close enough. You brought a motorcade to my block, he said, half laughing, half terrified. I did, she admitted, but I had to be sure you'd talk to me. Neighbors were watching from windows, some taking photos. Kevron could feel every eye on them. "You want to come inside?" he asked. She smiled. "Yes, I'd like that." Inside his modest apartment, the luxury felt out of place. The silence between them was thick. She took a seat at the small dining table while one of her staff placed a leather folder in front of her and quietly exited. Blythe leaned on the cane and looked around. "I like it. Feels like a real person lives here," she said. Kevron poured 2 glasses of water, more out of habit than hospitality. "You want to tell me why you're really here?" "I owe you more than words," she said. "You already said that last night," he replied. "But I didn't show it," she continued. "You lost your job over me, Kevron. I've been thinking about that every hour since I heard." He shook his head. "You're not responsible for how people react. I don't blame you, but I blame myself," she said softly. "Because I've spent years building walls around me. Money, silence, distance. You didn't ask for anything, and that's exactly why I'm here." Kevron leaned against the counter. "So what now? You write me a check?" She laughed. "I'm not here to buy you off." He crossed his arms. "Then what's the offer?" She opened the folder. Inside, documents, maps, blueprints, and a proposal with his name printed at the top. "I've been funding mobile medical units in rural parts of the country, places no hospital wants to go. We've been looking for someone with real training, someone who can run point in the field, train others, and actually care, not just clock hours." He stared at the paper, reading the first few lines. "You're asking me to run a clinic on wheels? I'm offering you the keys to build it the way you see fit," she said. "Equipment, staff, even the routes. It'll be your project. I'll fund it. You decide how far it goes." Kevron looked up. "Why me?" "Because you didn't ask who I was when I was at my worst," she said. "And you carried me when I couldn't walk. That's the kind of person I want building something that matters." He didn't know what to say. His hands trembled slightly as he closed the folder. "You don't have to decide today," she said, standing up. "But if you say yes, the first van is parked 2 blocks away. Ready?" She turned toward the door. Kevron followed her out, still speechless. But as the door shut behind her and those luxury cars rolled away, he realized the hardest part wasn't carrying her down that mountain. It was deciding whether to accept what she'd just put in his hands. The next few hours felt like standing in the middle of a crossroads with traffic speeding by in every direction. Kevron sat at the kitchen table, staring at the open folder like it might start talking to him. The proposal inside was more than generous. It was life-altering. Funding, freedom, impact. Everything most people in his profession only dreamed about. But it didn't feel real. Not yet. He called his cousin Tyron, who lived down in Spokane. "You busy?" Kevron asked. "Nah, just watching some rerun about cops messing up a case," Tyron said. "You good?" Kevron let out a breath. "Blythe Kessner showed up at my apartment this morning." "You serious?" "Yeah. She rolled up with 10 cars and a team that looked like Secret Service." "What the hell for?" "She offered me a job. Not just a job, actually. A project. She wants me to run a mobile medical unit, build it from scratch. Go to places nobody else goes." Tyron paused, then said, "And what's stopping you?" Kevron looked around his place. Bare walls, thrift store furniture, the microwave that never quite closed right. It had been enough. But now it all felt like a snapshot of a life built on settling. "I don't know. It feels big," Kevron admitted. "Too big. Like maybe I'm not the guy for it." "That's the dumbest thing I've heard you say," Tyron replied. "You carried a billionaire down a mountain like a damn firefighter. Who else should be doing something big if not you?" Kevron didn't respond right away. Tyron added, "Don't let them firing you be the story you remember. Let this be the next one." That stuck with him. Later that day, Kevron took a walk through town. No disguise, no hood up. If people recognized him, they kept it to themselves. But he noticed something else. Quiet stares, unsure glances. He heard someone whisper his name when he passed the post office. He stopped by the small park across from the bus depot and sat on a bench. He thought about the night shifts, the stretchers, the patients with no insurance, the old man who came in every week just to talk. He remembered how many times he'd advocated for someone who was about to be ignored. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. What Blythe was offering wasn't just a paycheck, it was control. He'd have a say in how people were treated, where the van went, what resources were brought to the table. It wasn't about charity, it was about trust. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number Blythe's assistant had scribbled in the folder. A man answered. "Mr. Daly?" "Yeah, tell her I said yes." The man didn't miss a beat. "She'll be pleased. We'll be by tomorrow morning to begin onboarding. Do you need time to relocate?" Kevron paused. "No. If I'm going to help people, I want to start right here." The next morning came fast. A single black SUV pulled up this time, more discreet. A woman in a gray blazer stepped out and introduced herself as Mara, legal liaison for the foundation. She handed him a new binder with finalized documents. Everything had been approved: budget, staff allocations, outreach map. His name was listed as Director of Field Medicine. "You'll have your first van by next week," Mara said. "We've already got a short list of towns in Idaho and South Dakota where care is either inconsistent or non-existent. You'll choose the rest." Kevron flipped through the pages. "I've never run anything like this before," he admitted. Mara smiled. Neither had Blythe when she started Terra Helix. "We're not looking for polished, we're looking for real." He signed the final page and handed it back. "Welcome to the work that matters," Mara said. As the SUV drove away, Kevron stood on his porch holding the folder. But as the dust settled from the tires, he felt something creeping in. Not doubt this time, but a question. What happens when people start watching you not for what you did, but for what they think you are? By the end of the week, the first van arrived. It looked more like a small clinic on wheels than anything else. Sleek, efficient, and surprisingly quiet. Outfitted with everything from portable ultrasound equipment to trauma kits and refrigerated compartments for vaccines, it was the real deal. Kevron walked around it in awe, running his hand along the side like he was inspecting something borrowed and fragile. He wasn't prepared for how fast the whispers would follow. At first, the comments came online. Nothing too wild, just your usual armchair critics. People questioning how a nurse who'd been fired just days earlier suddenly ended up running a multi-million-dollar outreach program. A few anonymous tweets suggested maybe he'd staged the whole rescue. One post went semi-viral. "Man saves rich lady gets rich? Feels a little too convenient, doesn't it?" Kevron didn't respond. He never did. But the more he ignored it, the louder it seemed to get. Even people in town started acting different. A barista at the corner coffee shop asked if he was really going to live off billionaire money now. A patient he used to treat at Westbrook walked right past him in the grocery store, eyes darting away. It was like the story had flipped overnight, from hero to opportunist. Tyron called again one night, voice tight. "You seeing this junk online?" Kevron sighed. "Yeah, I've been trying not to." "They're making it sound like you dragged her out of the woods for a payout." He leaned against the kitchen counter. "I didn't even know who she was." "You don't owe anybody a defense," Tyron said. "But if you don't say something, they're going to write your whole story for you." Kevron knew he was right, but every time he thought about speaking up, he hesitated. He didn't want to come off defensive or self-righteous. He just wanted to help people, quietly. That had always been his way. 2 weeks later, the first run of the mobile clinic took him to a reservation just outside Poplar, Montana. The town's clinic had shut down 2 years earlier, and folks had been driving nearly 90 minutes for basic care. He arrived just after sunrise. Word had already spread. A few dozen people were waiting, mothers with young children, elderly men in folding chairs, teenagers trying to act like they didn't need anything but still showing up. Kevron stepped out of the van, clipboard in hand, and said, "All right, folks, let's get to work." He spent 10 hours on his feet that day. By the end, his back was on fire, but he'd seen 46 patients, set 2 fractures, gave out 70 flu shots, pulled a toddler's infected splinter, and handed a grandmother new asthma medication. That night, sitting in the back of the van with his shoes off and a sandwich in hand, he felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Solid, grounded. But the moment didn't last. One of Blythe's team forwarded him an article from a national gossip site. The headline read, "Nurse Turned Mogul, How Kevron Daly Jumped from Fired to Funded." The piece didn't have sources, just speculation. Photos of him walking out of the hospital, followed by a grainy image of the caravan that had appeared outside his building. It painted the narrative as a Cinderella story with shady footnotes. Blythe called him the next day. "I read the piece," she said. Kevron sighed. "It's not even accurate." "Accuracy doesn't matter to people looking for a reason to doubt," she replied. "What matters is how you carry it." He paused. Should I respond? Set the record straight? That's up to you, she said. But I'll say this. Some people are always going to be uncomfortable with seeing someone like you hold the keys. He didn't have to ask what she meant. He felt it. But what kept him up that night wasn't the rumors. It was wondering how many people might need help and not come because they believed what they read. A week later, Kevron sat across from a journalist in a tiny, neutral cafe just off the edge of downtown Billings. No camera crew, no mic packs. Just 2 mugs of black coffee between them and a notebook the reporter barely touched. Her name was Shiloh Greer, freelancer, early 30s, sharp eyes that didn't blink much. She wasn't with one of the gossip sites or a mainstream network. She'd reached out through Blythe's office with a single sentence. I don't want your scandal. I want your side. Kevron had almost said no. But then he thought about all the patients who might skip his clinic because they'd read the wrong headline. He figured if someone was going to tell the truth, it had to start with him. You carried her down 3 miles? Shiloh asked, pen hovering. No stretcher, just your arms? He gave a slow nod. 4, actually. I stopped once to rest, but she was fading fast. Couldn't risk waiting for a ranger team. And you had no idea who she was? Didn't care, he said. She was hurt. I was trained. That was enough. Shiloh jotted something, then looked back up. Why do you think the story turned on you? Kevron thought for a moment. People don't like when someone jumps the line. They think if life hasn't handed you something slowly, it must be a shortcut. Do you feel like you jumped the line? He met her gaze. I got fired for helping someone. Then I got a second chance from someone who could have forgotten me. I didn't ask for it, but I'm not going to apologize for making it count. She gave the slightest smile and flipped the page. Do you ever wish you'd just kept walking that day? Let someone else find her? Kevron didn't even blink. No, never. That answer sat heavy between them. The interview ran 2 days later. It wasn't dramatic or flashy. It didn't accuse anyone. It was just honest. Kevron's words, without edits or spin. He talked about being raised by a single mom in Helena, how he got into nursing after watching a school friend bleed out because nobody nearby knew CPR. He spoke plainly about the day on the mountain. No embellishment, no hero talk. People noticed. The clinic's inbox began filling with messages from other nurses, from patients, from people in rural towns asking, will you come here next? Donations followed, not from corporations, but regular folks. One woman in Wyoming sent $40 with a note. You helped that lady. Maybe you can help my dad next. But not everyone liked the shift. One morning he found a note taped to the back of the van windshield. Bought and paid for. Hope she's worth it. No name. Just a bitter message, written in rushed capital letters. Kevron didn't report it. He didn't even mention it to Blythe. He just crumpled the paper and tossed it in the dumpster behind the pharmacy. Later that week, while restocking supplies, a man approached him outside the van. Daly, right? Kevron turned slowly. The man was in his 50s, scruffy beard, eyes too calm to trust. I read that article, the man said. You talk real smooth. Kevron didn't reply. The man shrugged. Just be careful. Fame like that, it don't last. And when it flips again, you better have a parachute. Kevron stared at him. I'm not trying to fly. I'm trying to work. The man gave a smirk, turned, and walked off. Later, Kevron sat alone in the van, lights dimmed, hands resting on his knees. He remembered something his mother once told him. Doing good won't always feel good, but you do it anyway. He looked down at the binder on the seat next to him. 6 more towns were waiting. 6 more places where no one else was going. But that night, he made a quiet decision. Let people talk. He'd build something too solid for rumors to touch. 3 months later, the van looked different, not on the outside, but in how people approached it. Kids waved when it pulled up. Elders waited early just to sit in line and talk. Volunteers in each town started calling ahead to organize the day's patients, help manage foot traffic, even bring sandwiches for those who came from miles away. Kevron had just finished checking a young boy's glucose levels in a rural town near Thermopolis, Wyoming. The boy's mom hugged him afterward. She said her son hadn't seen a doctor in over a year. The nearest clinic? 50 miles away, and they didn't have a car. He was on the road 6 days a week now. 1 stop at a time, 1 wound, 1 story, 1 handshake. It was slow work, honest work, nothing flashy. But every bandage, every vial, every beat of the portable heart monitor meant something. And the whispers, they'd faded. Sure, every now and then, someone on social media would try to reignite the old angle. Accusations of favoritism, speculation about Blythe's motives. But Kevron didn't respond anymore. He didn't need to. The people he helped spoke louder than the trolls ever could. Blythe visited twice, quietly. No motorcade, just her and a driver. She stayed for a few hours each time, asked questions, observed. She never hovered. She let him lead. After her second visit, they stood behind the van while the sun dipped below the prairie horizon. "You ever think about expanding this?" she asked. Kevron looked out at the field. A football tossed between some kids in the distance. "Yeah," he said, "but I want to get it right before I go big." She nodded. "That's the answer I hoped for." He turned to her. "You never told me why you really helped me. I mean, you said it was because I didn't ask who you were, but I feel like there's more." She hesitated, then answered, "You didn't treat me like a project. You didn't freeze or hesitate or try to perform. I've been around power my whole life, Kevron. Most people treat you like a mirror, just reflect what they want to see. But you saw a woman bleeding on the ground and said, 'I got you.' That's rare." He didn't reply. There wasn't anything to say. Before she left, she handed him a letter, handwritten, neat, folded once. He read it later that night. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs thanking him again, and at the end, a line that hit him right in the chest. "I've spent years building an empire. You reminded me that empires mean nothing if people forget how to serve." Kevron kept that letter tucked in the van's glove compartment. Months passed, and by spring, he'd trained 2 other nurses, bought a second van through the same program. He chose the name himself, North Reach Mobile Health. One morning, a teenager named Zoe asked if she could ride along and shadow him for the day. She wanted to be a paramedic, didn't think it was possible until she saw the van park in her town. He said yes, showed her how to take blood pressure, how to talk without rushing, how to listen between the words. When the day was over, she said, "I didn't know we could do something like this." Kevron looked at her and said, "We can, and you will." Back at home, his fridge still had that note from Tammy in 2B. The microwave still didn't close right, but none of that mattered. He was building something real, something lasting. And this time, nobody could take it away with a boardroom decision or a cold meeting in a small office. This time, he held the pen. Life doesn't always reward the loudest person or the one with the cleanest resume. Sometimes it finds the quiet one, carrying someone through pain, expecting nothing, and gives them a chance to rewrite the rules. If this story moved you, share it. And if you believe in doing good even when no one's watching, subscribe for more stories that remind us what really matters.